series called Building Great Families in the Midst of the Mess of Life. And as we went through that series, I was just kind of wrestling with the fact that we didn't have a message in it geared directly towards marriage and some of the practical things about marriage. And we finished up the series, but Marianna and I talked and felt that we could extend it one more week, and this week fell to a week where we could do that. And so we're going to share with you a little bit about marriage. And I want you to know this at the outset. If you are not married here today, okay, maybe you're a young person and you're still kind of thinking and hoping someday maybe you've been divorced, or you're a single person, and so on, or maybe your spouse has passed on and so on. This is what we want you to know if you're not married here today. We want you to still take the principles and the truths of this message and apply them to your life, to your relationship with God, and to your relationships in your life. And if you're a young person hoping to be married someday, then take these principles and hang on to them, okay? Put them away and make sure you're going to make use of them at some point. And then we would plead with all of us this, that no matter what your marriage status is, that you would fight for marriages, that you would help every marriage you know and everybody you know, because marriage is under attack. It's not an easy thing. And as we know, today the majority of marriages don't make it. And so we need your help. All of us need each other's help. And so you take these principles, you learn them so that you can help other people as well. Fair enough? So we're going to share with you, and what we're going to share with you is actually a little bit about ourselves, our dating and then marriage journey. So it's kind of like our love story. Who doesn't love a love story, right? Isn't that sweet? Yeah. Oh, there we, thank you. Whoever was, see, I need some advice. This guy's fighting for my marriage right there, helping me out. So we're going to tell you our love story, and out of it, there's going to be some themes that come out, and we want to kind of share out those themes at the end. And God willing, it'll help us all in our relationships. So.
Okay, so here we go. Our love story begins when we're 16 years old, believe it or not. And we were at summer camp. How many people have been to summer Bible camp? Parents, it's a dangerous place to send your kids. So we were signed up to serve and work at the summer camp for the summer as counselors, and we both showed up to staff training. And our first memory of each other is actually all of us as staff sitting on a balcony, kind of as a get to know you, this is what we're going to put you through this summer kind of session of training. And what I noticed right away was Daniel's passion and confidence and his lovely, lovely long red curls. And I think
that's actually true. Funny enough, I had long, curly red hair. Yeah.
And I think what he noticed first, or what I remember him noticing first, is the book I was reading.
Actually, I also noticed her good looks, just so we're clear on that.
If you know him, you know books are a massive thing. And that was the first thing that he noticed was the book, or at least that's the conversation starter he used.
Yes.
Maybe that was more like it. So our roles at the camp are a little bit different. He was actually working directly with the kids, and I was classified general help, which if you've ever worked at camp, you know that means dishes, kitchen duties, etc., etc. And so one of my main jobs was washing these massive big pots and pans that they used to cook all the food for the kids. And I began to notice as the summer wore on that I seemed to have a very willing partner in my washing of my pots, more and more and more. And it wasn't long before every meal, when I showed up to wash the pots, there was a man standing there, a boy actually, standing there ready to dry them for me.
It's true. It's amazing. I'd never really done dishes much in my entire life, and all of a sudden I was the master dish doer at this camp, helping out every single meal. It was quite a deal.
So we had a lot of things in common. We were both from families with 4 kids. We both had the amazing gift of having parents who loved God and who had raised us to love Him. But the biggest thing that stood out to both of us is that we both were very passionate about serving God. We wanted to love Him, we wanted to know Him, and we wanted to do whatever it took to know Him better and to serve Him. And that was actually the biggest thing that stood out to me about Daniel, was up till that point in my life, I'd never met a boy who was passionate about serving God, and more passionate about that than anything else, and just wanting to do that with his whole life. And that was really the first thing that attracted me to him. We also had many differences. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and so all us oldest kids know that that means you're the responsible child.
And funny enough, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And she was responsible. I was definitely not a responsible person. In fact, reckless and rebellious defined my teenage years a lot better than responsible.
I was incredibly shy. I was really, really insecure. And I was also incredibly, incredibly stubborn.
I was very outgoing, as opposed to her shyness, a little overconfident, and a very passionate person.
I came from a very controlled family background. So lots of rules. This is what our life looks like, and you stay inside the box.
And although my family was very Christian and lived very moral lives, our family had almost no rules. We literally could do pretty much what we wanted. It was a free-for-all in the sense of the boundaries and the rules were not there. So it's quite a contrast.
And I grew up in the country. We lived on an acreage, and so I was a country girl through and through.
And I was very much a city boy.
But the very worst thing of all for two 16-year-olds, and this is a little bit out of context because we're both from Alberta, but in Alberta, the very worst thing that could happen would be that a girl from near Edmonton could meet and fall in love with a boy from Calgary.
Which is true. Calgary and Edmonton are kind of like oil and water, or actually like Oilers and Flames, because those were the two hockey teams that were rivals, and so a little tough on our relationship.
And this was the days where we had the great Gretzky, and so it was a very big
I
rivalry.
hated
at that
Wayne
time.
Gretzky. Anybody else hate Wayne Gretzky? I don't know. Anyway, best hockey player of all time, I now know, but back then I didn't think so. All right, but
And so we weren't sure we could survive that, but we did. So that summer ended after working together all summer, and we both went home back to school and to our friends. And we started 2 years of letter writing and phone calls. And this was way back in the day. We're dating ourselves, but this is when long-distance phone calls were not cheap. Who remembers that? Okay. There was no Facebook. There was not much email. There was no texting, really. Skype did not exist. And so there really was only letters and phone calls. And so I used to say we, but in all actuality, he spent an awful lot of money on phone calls over those next 2 years.
yeah, it's funny. My parents were very careful with finances, and so Dad would take the phone bill and divvy it out between us four boys by phone number, who paid what. And it wasn't unusual for me to get a phone bill as a 17-year-old kid of like $80 on a given month. So true love right there, right? That should let me watch the football game this afternoon. Know what I'm saying? I mean, if anything. Just kidding.
So we didn't plan this, but we both kept all those letters. And what we did now, once we got married, is we put them all into a binder, which we have. And we started reading through them after we'd been married, and we really began to see there the first real theme of our relationship. And like I said before, when we first met, we were both passionate about following Jesus, and that shows up in the letters. I mean, we wrote sermons to each other. We wrote Bible verses to each other. We wrote prayers over each other. Whenever we talk on the phone, we would pray together. And it really became a theme of our relationship that we wanted to chase Jesus. And as we got more and more serious, it really became we want to chase Jesus together. And that's kind of the first major theme of our relationship that showed up.
Yeah, and so looking back on those letters now, they're really funny to read because they're pretty corny, and they're very overly spiritual. But it actually kind of started even before we started really, I don't know if dating's the right word, but connecting on a boyfriend-girlfriend level. Because here I was, a young kid at camp, teenager, and although I was very much a Christian, camp and teenagers and boys just has a lot to do with looking for a girl, right? And looking for a girlfriend and all those things. And that had been very much my journey up until that point. Was always kind of finding a girlfriend and that kind of thing. But at this point in my life, I was so wholeheartedly committed to chasing Christ and living for Christ and pursuing Christ and getting to know Christ better, that actually at that summer camp, I had made a commitment to God, and very seriously, and spent a lot of time in prayer over this, just saying, God, I'm going to chase you and you only. I don't want my life going in two directions, chasing horizontally and chasing vertically. I just want to chase God, and that's it. And literally to the point where I was like, I'll be celibate for the rest of my life if I have to. I don't care. I'm just all God. So I was pretty fanatical about that and pretty committed to that. And then there was this girl that I was attracted to, and I would kind of pray against it almost, like this isn't. And I really felt like God was saying, yes, this is a person that whatever you should hang out with. And I was like, no, God, you don't get it. I'm chasing you alone. You're the only one for me, God, nobody else. And then in prayer, I really felt like God gave me this picture that I was chasing Christ with everything I had, like running towards a light. But instead of me turning my attention to the side and chasing that direction, that God would bring somebody along the path in my life who would also chase God together with me. And that rather than us chasing each other, we would simply chase Christ side by side. And so I kind of had this picture of us holding hands, chasing Christ together. I shared that with her in those days, dating days, and that became a theme for us, as she said. So much so that it was actually in our vows. They sounded kind of funny, but we were like to love and to cherish, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, and to chase Jesus together. Because that was just fundamental to our relationship. And to this day, 17 years now, we've been married, and to this day, we still write that in our love notes and cards to each other. We still pray it when we pray together. Pursuing Christ together is a major theme for us. So it's neat.
So after 2 years of long-distance dating, so our Calgary and Edmontonian thing lasted 2 years, when we turned 18, I graduated from high school, and I did move to the dark side. I moved down to Calgary and very slowly became a Calgarian at heart and a Calgary Flames fan even. We had lost Wayne Gretzky, so it wasn't such a big deal anymore. And this year was actually really hard. We call this our fighting year. I don't know if you've ever seen a video of two massive rivers meeting up to become one, but that's really how we feel about this year. It was like this big crash together of waves, and it was really difficult. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of slamming down of telephones and of doors. I walked out of the house once, I think.
A lot of crying.
A lot of crying. It was a rough year. We were in Bible college together, and we'd sit in icy silence through our class and then stomp downstairs to an empty office and have it out for the rest of the day. And it was just a really, really rough year. And looking back, I think this is when we really began to realize that marriage is hard. And I think both being from Christian homes and growing up in church, I think we honestly believe to the depths of our being that if we loved God, marriage would be easy. And that is just not true. If you're following God, that does not mean that marriage is going to be easy. Marriage is a putting together of two lives, and it is hard. And so we really learned that in this year.
So you got to kind of picture this, two 19-year-olds or 19, 18 years old in Bible college, these wonderful Christians, and we fought and fought and fought and fought, like day in, day out, week in, week out. We thought, like, what are we thinking here in this relationship? But that was that year. It was tough.
Yeah, and our worst one, I think, was one night we were talking on the phone, and we were yelling and having it out. And I got so mad, I slammed down the phone, and it kept ringing. And I was like, I am not answering that phone. And I didn't. I refused to answer the phone. And at that time, we lived a block apart from each other. So the next thing I knew, there was someone knocking on the door. And I was like, I am not answering the door. So I went to the door.
She locked me out, just to be clear.
And I locked him out.
Yeah.
And he actually circled the house until he found a window that was open.
That's right.
And
I got in there.
He got in, and it was all good. We fought it through, and it was all good. But that's just a picture of what that year looked like for us. And we got to this point where the second theme really starts to come out. We really got to this point because you're fighting so much every day. You just think, is this worth it? Is this really God? That was the bigger question for us because chasing Jesus was so important. We wanted to know, is this really God? And if it's God, then we are just going to have to decide that this is God, we're going to obey, and we're in. And our word for that is covenant. And we really came to that by the end of that year. It was like, okay, this is God, and God wants us to be together. And so we're going to have to do whatever it takes to be in, and we're going to decide that up front so that it's never a question again from this moment on. And that really became a theme of our marriage.
Yeah, and so for us, the reality has been, even to this day, if it wasn't for just putting our foot down and saying, we're in, come hell or high water, because hell has come, and high water has come in our relationship. And so if it wasn't for that covenant thing, we don't think we would have made it.
So we got through that year. We both lived. We didn't kill each other. We were okay. And the fourth year then was actually very complacent. Daniel was working, he was youth pastoring, and I just jumped in full bore, and we just went on with our lives. We were very busy, we got along great, we had a good time, we were ministering together, And it was just very comfortable. And then this day came along, and we'll never forget this day, but we were working at that time for Pastor George and Hazel. And Pastor George and Hazel are the founders and president of Victory Churches International. And Daniel was actually renting a bedroom from them at that time. So they were really parent figures in our lives. And we were driving with Pastor Hazel somewhere.
Neither of our parents lived in Calgary at that time, and so, yeah.
Yeah, so they had really stepped in and were kind of that figure for us. And we were driving with Pastor Hazel, and she's such a great mom. And she was asking us questions. How's your relationship going? How are you doing with this? How are you doing with that? And we were answering them and having this great discussion. And then there was this pause, and she kind of looked at us and she said, "So why aren't you getting married?" And we kind of looked at each other and looked at her and started stuttering and stammering and stuttering and stammering. And what it came down to is we didn't know. We didn't know why we weren't getting married. We were just comfortable. And so she really encouraged us to really think about it and to start planning for it. And we did. We got engaged quite quickly. Then we got married later that summer. And we were just very thankful for that. There we are.
There it is.
So the next season was really a season of great learning for us. We were just turned 20 when we got married. Two youngins.
I was 21.
Were you?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
you
you're
were.
20.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just turned 20. He was 21. My apologies. And
I've always been a little older, a little more mature.
football is going away. No football.
I don't know where that came from. That's not even in the script or anything, so we'll just keep on going here.
So Daniel was youth pastoring, and I was working at a bakery. And money was really, really tight. You know, that newlywed phase, generally money's really tight. And so we lived in the cheapest rental properties we could find. And actually in the first 5 years of our marriage, we moved every 8 months. Not because we loved moving, but just because every time something cheaper would come up, we would move into it because that's how tight money was. And actually, at the end of it all, in the middle of there, we found some friends who were struggling financially as well, and we ended up moving in together, our two families. We shared a house, and we did that for 2.5 years. And it was such a cool thing. We weren't sure how it would work, but it worked phenomenally, and they're actually very close to us. We didn't kill each other then either, so it was such a blessing. But it was hard. We fell into this pattern of going hard all week. We would work really, really long hours, and then we would crash on the weekend. And we just did that over and over and over, and it became a normal pattern for us that we'd get home from youth on Friday night at the end of the week, and usually Daniel or I would get sick. We would really crash, and being burnt out and running at that speed was really a normal pattern for us at that season.
Yeah, struggling with burnout and pushing too hard just became a way of life for us, which led into our first anniversary.
And so before our first anniversary, we unexpectedly found out we were pregnant. And that was a bit of a shock. We thought we would wait a while like every young couple, but God had other ideas for us. And I really think it was the grace of God that looked down and said, "Okay, you youngins, let me help you out." And so Nathan was born just before I turned 22. There he is. And Nathan means gift from God. And he really was a gift from God to us in that season. It was like God was saying, "Okay, guys, you need to just realize some stuff about life." And we were going so hard that this is what our life really looked like. When I had Nathan, Daniel came to pick me up from the hospital, but we didn't go home. We went from the hospital to youth, ran the youth Bible study, and then we went home. And that was just normal. That was what we did all the time. And so we discovered really, really quickly that it's hard to go that hard when you have a newborn. Newborns don't tend to thrive in a state of burnout. It didn't really work very well. And so we started to realize we were going to need help here, and we had to make some changes. And so we started to frantically read books, and we started to ask others around us for any help or advice they would have to say. And we discovered we just really needed to become more intentional. If we were going to be great parents and great pastors and have a good marriage still, we were going to have to learn to work really hard at constantly growing and learning. Thankfully, we'd always loved to read and loved to learn, and so we just dove in. We found every book we could on the subject, and we began to work really, really, really hard at working hard at getting better.
And this was kind of a defining time in my life. I think I've shared it with you as a church before, but I think I was driving in my car. I'm not even 100% sure, but I was listening to a sermon, and the pastor shared how at one point he was burning himself out, working way too hard, and his wife actually approached him and said, "I'm done. I am done with this marriage. There's not even a marriage here. It's over." And it was a wake-up call for him, and so he changed his lifestyle patterns and changed his work patterns and won his wife back and got his marriage straightened out. But as he shared that story, and I listened to him share it, it just dawned on me, I've heard this somewhere before. And then I started thinking about person after person after person that I knew. Some pastors, some business leaders, some people just going through life, but who had not worked hard at their marriage, who had not just put effort into that side of their lives. And they had watched their marriages fall apart. Some had barely in time saved it, and some hadn't. And it just hit me in that moment. I just thought, that's the trajectory we're on. That's the direction my marriage is going. If I don't wake up and change some things about my life, no matter how hard we work at it, no matter how much of all those other things, if we don't change some of our lifestyle patterns and some of the ways that we're doing it, our marriage is going to fall apart one of these days. And so that for me, that was a wake-up call time. And really from that day forward, we started making some changes, and then some other things started to happen.
So we started coming home more in the evenings. It wasn't uncommon for us to stay at the church till 10 or 11 at night, every single night. So we started coming home more in the evenings. We began becoming more intentional about things like going to bed and eating well and blocking time for dates and family times and taking advantages of conferences and books and all those kind of things just to improve and get better. This is another thing we did, which I think was one of the most helpful things, is we started looking around us for older couples around us whose families we admired, who we thought we wanted to maybe be like. And we would just ask them for coffee, and we'd just drill them with 1,000 questions. And we'd let them know up front, like, hey, can we take you out for coffee and ask you questions about your marriage, your family, and the patterns you do? And we found that really, really helpful as well. And like I said before, we read a lot of books because that's just who we are. Then Michaela was born 2 years after that. Once we had, there they are. And then we also entered another transition here. Up till that point, I'd been very involved in Daniel's ministry. Like I said, I just went to everything. Nathan was really calm. He was an easygoing kid. He traveled well. So we just took him to everything, to youth, to leaders' meetings, everything we went to, he came with. But when you have a 2-year-old and a newborn, that doesn't work quite so well. And so we really began to transition into more of the traditional family, if you will. I became more of a stay-at-home mom with the kids, and he became more of the dad going to work. And that was actually really difficult. It doesn't sound difficult, but when you've been doing everything together for the last, 3-4 years, and suddenly you're doing things separately, we really had to continue to work hard at figuring out how to stay connected and still fit these new roles that we'd been moving into. And then when Joel was born, again, it transitioned again. And so, it was just a season where we realized that working hard at it was not going to be a season. It was something that we were going to have to make a pattern in our marriage.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of part of our discovery at that time in our lives was every season of our lives, working hard at it looked different. So sometimes it meant being willing to keep our fights going and keep fighting them out and not give up on a fight. Sometimes it meant being intentional about dating each other because we wouldn't see each other for a whole week, and just running our own directions and so on. So different seasons of our lives, there were different ways we had to work hard at it, but we just realized if we were going to sustain this relationship and keep its trajectory going in the right direction, that working hard at it was something we had to do.
So we're going to fast forward now to 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago. Daniel was the associate pastor at Royal Oak Victory Church in Calgary, and we really had our dream life. We had our perfect house. The kids were in the perfect school. We'd been at the church for 15 years. We loved the job. We loved the community there. We had a really strong circle of deep friendships and relationships. Daniel's parents live 15 minutes down the road, which doesn't get any better than that. And life was just perfect. We were perfectly happy. We thought we'd landed into our dream world. But obviously God thought that we were a little bit too comfortable, because then that summer we got a phone call from a gentleman named Pastor Terry Murphy. And he called and he said, I was just wondering if you guys would pray about possibly moving to Moose Jaw and becoming the senior pastors there. And for us, it was one of those things where we just knew, that doesn't happen to me a lot. But in that moment, we hung up the phone and we looked at each other and we were like, God's moving us. This is what's happening. And even our kids knew, which was what blew us away the most. You know, Joel, they were quite young. Joel was 5, Michaela was 8, Nathan was 10. And one day I was in the kitchen and Michaela wandered in. She was chatting about other things, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, she said, "Hey, Mom, I don't want to move, but God's telling us to, isn't he?" And it was like, yes, baby, he is. And you just confirmed it again for us that he's telling us to move. And so we did. We packed up. We'd never even been to Moose Jaw. I think I'd been to Saskatchewan once in my entire life previous to that. But we did. We packed up and we moved here. And this is where we enter a fourth theme. And, you know, in a lot of ways, the last 5 years have been the hardest season of our lives. In other ways, they've been the best season of our lives. But what we really learned in the last 5 years is that if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And so we really have hit some spots in the last 5 years where we had to go, okay, did God really call us here? Is God really faithful? Do his promises actually work? When it's good and when it's bad, does what God says in the word actually work? And we have fought hard these 5 years and come out going, yes, they do. They absolutely do. And at the bottom of it all, in the hard times, if we learned that if you don't work at fanning hope, then you aren't going to make it. And so you have to do whatever it takes to fan that spark of hope, because at the end of the day, if you lose your hope, you're not going to make it. And so that's what we've really learned these last 5 years, is you need to have an unshakable trust in God and do whatever it takes to fan the hope that marriage and life can be amazing and that he is faithful and he'll do what he says.
Yeah, and right on. And that's just the reality. Some seasons of our lives, we go through what we feel are impossible situations. We'll talk more about hope in a little bit, but along those lines, for us, hope hasn't just meant that we hope we'll make it, or that we hope we'll stay married. It's meant that we hope we can have a dream marriage, a great marriage, a marriage where we're best friends and so on, that we keep that hope alive, not just a barely survival type hope. So that's what it's meant to us. So here we are, 17 years married, and the truth is we're still very different from each other. Oh yeah, look at this. Oh, there we are. That's actually at a wall here in Moose Jaw. Anybody know where that is? No? Anybody know?
This is my favorite wall in all of Moose Jaw. When we first moved here, I saw it, and I always said I want to get a family picture taken there. And so this picture is, I think, a year and a half old. We just stopped one day and took a photo, and I was so glad because a few months after that, they began building Brown's Social House right over this wall.
So that wall is now gone. You can't see it anymore. I mean, it's there, but it's hidden. And so kind of fun. That's where Brown's Social House is now. So here we are, 17 years later, still very different. Marianna is a very structured and planned person. I am very scattered and a very spontaneous person. We clean very differently. When Marianna cleans, she likes things deep cleaned, really clean, like all the nooks and crannies and all the things washed right off. When I clean, I like things straightened. I just don't like the clutter. Know what I'm saying? Just get rid of the clutter and I'm good. So that we're very different that way. When it comes to raising kids, she likes our kids safe and well taken care of. I like our kids stretched and experiencing new things. When we fight, and yes, we still fight, she clams up, and I react very differently when we fight. I talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk.
But I've learned the faster I start talking, the faster he'll be quiet.
Exactly.
So it's been good for us, too.
So if you ever want me to get me to stop preaching sometime, you know what to do, right? So we're different in our cleaning, in our child raising, in our fighting. Another way we're different is, although Marianna likes affectionate touch, and I like affectionate touch, but I'm pretty sure we mean very different things when we say that. You know what I'm saying there? Just read between the lines. All right.
Let's move on.
She likes sitting and relaxing. I like going out, doing stuff, and being activistic. So here's what we want you to know at this point in our journey, and really this is maybe the meta narrative of our story, or the meta principle of our story, is that it is still hard for us. 17 years later, working hard at it, chasing Jesus together, having covenant, keeping hope alive. It's still hard for us, this thing called marriage. We still have issues and struggles and battles, and this hasn't been, 17 years of bliss. We can't give you 4 little principles and just say, and you'll live happily ever after. Everything will just be fine, and everything will be sweet and nice. It hasn't been easy. It's been a hard journey our way. But I'll tell you this, it has been great. And Marianna, to this day, is my best friend. We are more in love with each other today than we have ever been in our whole lives, and we thank God every day for our marriage. So here's what we want you to know. It can be both hard and great. It can be both. You don't have to think, oh, because it's hard, it has to be horrible, or if it was only easy, then it would be great. It can be both hard and great to have a great marriage and a great relationship. And we believe that God has allowed these 4 themes to develop in our relationship to just show us ways in which a difficult marriage and a difficult life even can become a great life, or great lives, and a great marriage and a great family, even in the midst of storms. So we're going to spend just the remaining few minutes that we have together teasing out these 4 themes. The first one being chasing Jesus together. Chasing Jesus is really actually an individual thing first before it's a together thing. It helps you get your eyes off yourself, helps you get your eyes off your spouse, and it helps you get your eyes onto God. And I'll tell you this, in marriage and in any relationship, focusing all your attention on the other person can actually be destructive. And so it keeps you from making your spouse an idol, okay, and expecting things from them that they can never really give you. Dr. Les and Leslie Parrott say it this way. They say, if you try to build intimacy with another person before you've done the hard work of getting whole or healthy on your own, all your relationships become an attempt to complete yourself, and they will fall flat. And church, this is just so critical. When we try to get somebody else to complete us, when we try to make somebody else fill us and fulfill us, we put expectations on them that they will never be able to meet for us. And we put things on them that are unfair to them and that are unfair to us, and we end up destroying ourselves and our relationships when we do that. So God has just made it so that we find that completeness in Him. In Ephesians chapter 3, it says it this way: may you experience the love of Christ, though it's too great to fully understand. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. That's where we're supposed to find our completeness. How many of you have seen the movie Jerry Maguire? Okay, it's not that we're recommending it, okay, but just it is the most quoted movie of all cinematic history, and somebody just said it there. What are some of the quotes from Jerry Maguire? Who knows them? Okay, you had me at hello and show me the money, right? And you may have heard me use this illustration before. But one of the things that leads up to that, you had me at hello, was Jerry Maguire. He's talking to his wife, who he's trying to win back to her, and he gives her this amazing romantic speech that, the film writers wrote for him, by the way. And, it's hard on us men, because you got like 3 or 4 film writers working for like 3 weeks on building these perfectly romantic speeches, and here we are, just struggling along. It's hard. Just want you to know that, ladies, okay? It's tough. But anyway, there you go. So anyway, Jerry Maguire gets to this point where he says to her with these longing eyes, "You complete me." And, all the ladies' eyes tear up, and they're like, "I just wish a man would say that to me. You complete me." And it's so beautiful and so romantic, but it's so wrong. And it's so messed up, and it's so not what Scripture teaches, okay? And what God teaches is that we find our completeness in Christ, and then out of that fullness, we can approach our relationships in healthy ways, not looking to people to offer something they can't offer. So that's kind of part of that chasing Christ thing. But
and we've really learned that practically, because the question is, chasing Jesus is a great ideal, but what does that look like practically? And we've struggled through this, and what we've really learned is it looks differently for every couple in every season. And it's really an individual thing first. You have to be chasing Jesus yourself before you can chase Jesus together. And it's going to look different. And so over our 17-year marriage, it's looked different all the time. It changes. It's fluid. So there are some constants, like church attendance is pretty big deal in our home. Even when we're on holidays, we're at church. Giving and tithing and those kind of things are constants. But there's a lot of other things like praying together, which we do sometimes and we don't others, and reading devotions together, like being in small groups. There's all these kinds of things that we've done seasonally, but we don't always do constantly.
And this is what we found so much. We go to seminars and we learn about marriages and all this stuff. And what we found is when we tried to put somebody else's cookie cutter of their spirituality onto our relationship, it just didn't work. So we try to take the principles and then figure out what those are going to look like for us. A big part of that for us, especially early on in our journey, but even still today, is it's not our job to pressure each other spiritually. It's our job to chase Christ, and when the other one's along for the ride, then we chase Christ together. And this is really important for you guys as couples especially, that you can't force anybody else to do anything spiritually. In fact, the more you push people spiritually, the more they just push back, right? And it actually ends up pushing people away. You can invite, and then you can just do your part. And you let the other person do whatever they choose to do, okay, rather than sort of that pressure thing.
So for us, the question is really, how can we bring God into this season of our lives, and what does it look like right now in this season? Instead of, what are the rules and expectations that we need to match up to be properly chasing Jesus?
Yeah.
And so it's more, how can we invite God into this and keep him a part of it, and what does it look like? And definitely not cookie cutter. That's kind of the biggest lesson that we've really learned there.
We just have a few more minutes, so we'll talk about covenant.
Okay, so covenant, there comes a point in every relationship where you just have to decide if it's God and if you're in. And once that happens, then you can go on from there with a sense of security. And on this one of my favorite quotes is from Ruth Graham, who was Dr. Billy Graham's wife. And a reporter asked her once if she had ever considered divorce. And she said this very quickly. She said, "Divorce? No. Murder? Yes." And for me, that just shows...
She was joking, okay? Joking,
yeah.
but...
That just shows to me the depth. She had decided, this is God, this is the relationship he's put me in, and no matter what, come hell or high water, I am in this thing for good.
And that's just reality. When you make a covenant, you just say, I'm in. And it puts a protection and a safety around your relationship. It makes you fight through your fights, because you got to, right? I mean, I got to live with this person tomorrow, so we better work this out. We better fight all the way to the finish instead of just quitting halfway through. And we found it neat that we can renew our covenant at times. Whenever we go to a marriage, we renew our own covenant. We just sit there and talk with each other. Sometimes we go through our vows together or different things, just to make that an important part of our relationship. And of course, that's all over God's word. Jesus said it this way in Matthew 19, "They are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." The third theme for us was working hard at it. And although we affirmed this when we got married, that we would work hard at the relationship, we have just found that is something we have to continually give ourselves to. And we tell this to married couples all the time when we do marriage counseling or premarital counseling or we do weddings. We say your marriage is like a garden, and if you don't tend it, it will fall apart. It just will. It'll become messy and a disaster in very short order. Don't think that just because it's meant to be, it's all going to go along nicely. Anything you leave to itself in this fallen world, gravity will just take it downward. And so you have to be intentional about it. You have to work at it. You have to put effort and energy and prayer into it to see it have this. And the way we talk about it is we talk about the trajectory of our marriage. So we just ask this question. Over the last few months, is our marriage getting better or is it not? Because if it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so that's just a question we ask each other all the time, or we think about even by ourselves, is how's it going? And then we engage in ways. And it usually takes more work than you think. Okay? In fact, the most valuable things take the most amount of effort, don't they? So it just takes huge, huge, huge amounts of time, energy, sacrifice, and so on. And for us, that's meant books and conferences and videos and small groups and getting away and couch time, what we call couch time, which is just a 10-minute check-in every day. It's meant date nights. It's meant, like I said, not giving up on a fight and those kind of things. Proverbs says it this way: by wisdom a house is built, through understanding it's established, through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And all that means is houses don't build themselves, right? It's going to take intentionality. It's going to take effort. It's going to take some wisdom. It's going to take some effort. So, do you want to say anything to that? Okay. So then the last one is this keeping hope alive one. And the reality is this: hurt happens. We're broken people. We hurt each other. And the closer your relationship is, the more those things hurt. And bitterness comes into relationships. Some days we're overwhelmed. Some days we're so tired you can't even see straight. Some days it seems absolutely impossible. There's satanic attacks that come against our marriages and that try to take them out. The reality is that if we don't fan the flames of hope, it dies. And you can feel it dying. You can feel the fire going out. You can feel your heart getting harder. And sometimes it happens slowly. Sometimes it happens more quickly. But without a vision, you don't have anything to go on. You have no sense of purpose, and you don't work at things after that. And so we just have to keep our dream for a great marriage, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how impossible it seems. The cool thing for Christ followers is we have a God who does the impossible. We have a God who takes crazy, impossible situations that seem hopeless, situations that seem like this could never possibly be, and he makes them work out. So we just hold on to hope whenever we feel like we've got no hope, and we run to that God who does the impossible.